Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending. What we'd like to begin with, first of all, is a roll call of members. Will you do that, please, Brent?
Of course, Chairman. Right, starting from the top of the list, Councillor Crosby.
Here.
Councillor Butte. Councillor Cato. Cherry.
Hello, here.
Thank you. Councillor Harley has given apologies. Councillor Havison.
Yes, here.
Thank you. Councillor Hearn.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Here.
Thank you very much. Councillor Keating.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Parker has sent his apologies. Councillor Willis.
I'm here.
Thank you. And Georgie Pick.
Good morning. I'm here.
Thank you very much. That's everyone, Chairman. Would you like me to run through the list for the people who haven't answered yet, or shall we take it as read that they're... So
Let's take it as read. Are we quorate?
We are quorate, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. Agenda item 1, public discussion. Do we have and participation? Do we have anyone who has indicated that they want to participate?
No members of the public have indicated their wish to speak, Chairman.
Thank you very much. That's noted. Apologies for absence and notification of substitutes. I think we've had that at that point, and we'll take it as read. It may well be the case that John and others may simply be late in reaching us. Declaration of does anyone have a declaration of disclosable pecuniary interest? Thank you. Minutes of the 25th of June 2020. I'm sure everyone has read them at length. Shall we? Are there any issues relating to those minutes? Any concerns?
No.
Then we'll take it as read that they are an accurate record. All those in favour, hands up will be fine.
Yes.
Thank you. Matters referred by the Council, the Executive or other committees and panels.
There are none, Chairman.
Thank you. What I'd like to do at this point is highlight, if you are unaware, that Mark Hughes has left the council. He's retired and so forth. I, for one, will miss him because he was incredibly helpful to me in guiding and informing my understanding of the issues. And I'd like to put it to members that perhaps as a panel we could put together a formal all-member response to say how grateful we are for his help and guidance in the past and our best wishes for the future. Agreed?
I'd like to be included in that as well, please, Chair.
Of course, no problem at all. I would assume that it will be all members, including you, Ruth, and Georgie and everyone else. So I think I really enjoyed working with him. The other thing to note to you is that Councillor Mike Solomon has stepped down from the committee because he is now an executive member, I understand, responsible for communications. So we have a vacancy from that point of view. That's something that I would need to discuss with the leader, but we'll notify you at a later point what measures are going to be taken. Okay, thank you very much. So at that point, have we got Hayley here?
I am here, Chair.
Good morning, Hayley. So I think that we start with your presentation on supporting carers during COVID-19, if you'd like to proceed.
Okay, Leo, can you bring the presentation up for me, please?
Haley, we might struggle with that. If you can bear with me, I'll do my best to bring it up.
Sorry, if I may interject here, I can bring it up.
Okay. Thank you, Brent.
Great, Brent. Thank you.
May I ask a question, please? Is it the same presentation that we have in the papers, or is it different?
It should be the same.
Thank you.
Thank
Being
you.
on the phone, I'd be in trouble.
Okay. Okay. So, Chair, I think I'd just like to make the point before I go into the presentation that although we're talking about supporting carers during COVID, I personally think that there's been a national lack of recognition for carers that existed even pre-COVID. And so I'd like to think about carers and how we support them going forward in the broadest sense, not just in the COVID sense. Are you happy with that, Councillor Crosby?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so going on to the first slide, and I'm really not wanting to bamboozle you with figures, but I think it's really important that we do look at the scale of caring in the UK. Currently, we have.
Sorry, Haley. I do apologise. Ruth, you have your hands up.
Do I? No.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, Haley. I apologise. Thank you. Please.
That's okay. So if we look at caring in the UK in its totality, we've actually got 6.5 million carers in the UK, and that is predicted to increase to 9 million by 2037. And when you look in terms of the broader economy, informal and unpaid carers actually save the UK economy 132 billion a year. And it is a fact that 3 in 5 of us will become a carer at some point in our lives. So it's something that will affect 3 in 5 of all of us sitting on this meeting this morning. So of those 6.5 million people, they are caring in an unpaid capacity for about 15 million people. And 4 in 5 of our carers are unpaid, meaning that they're not in employment. And they are providing more care now than they ever have before, especially in light of COVID. And we can talk through some of the reasons for that. More than 3/4 of carers have reported that the needs of the person that they are living with are increasing, and they are increasing quite significantly. And 64% nationally have told us that they've not had a break in the last 6 months. More than half, 58% of carers, have reported a decline in their physical health throughout the pandemic, and 64% have said that their mental health has deteriorated. 78% of those are saying that they are physically and mentally exhausted, and over 70% are really concerned about how they're going to get through the winter. And these figures were actually collated, Chair, before we went back into another lockdown. If we look at the next slide, which has been developed from the Carers Trust in October, they reported that 40% of young carers and 59% of young adults have also said that they've had a worsening in their mental health, and 67% of young carers and 78% of young adult carers are really worried about their future. And I think that's because of a multitude of reasons. It is in regard to their caring responsibilities, but it's also in regard to their concerns about the economy and whether they will be able to get into employment going forward. They're also reporting significant amounts of stress, and they're saying that they feel a lot less connected to others and their community. 11% of young carers and nearly 20% of young adult carers have also reported an increase of 30 hours or more in the amount of time that they spend caring. Now, given the scale of caring in the UK, I had a look at the NHS England long-term plan, and they have some aspirations for carers. But when I looked through that document, they've only got 4 key areas, which I thought were quite bland. One is around implementing quality markers for GPs. And when I investigated that a bit further, I found that actually carers are not in the GP contracts. So whilst it's good practice for GPs to ask whether you are a carer, it's not actually in their contract of employment to do that. And so it is very much based on goodwill. They also have an ambition to recognise carers and promote carers' passports, support carers in contingency and emergency planning, and to develop top tips for primary care in regard to young carers. So personally, I'm not sure across health and social care that actually we're still getting the recognition in the carers arena that we should have. So moving on to the next slide and looking at caring in North Somerset. Our national data for last year told us that actually we've got about 22,500 carers. And we've asked them what the main issues have been since April, and they report very, very similar to the national data in regards to suffering additional stress, not being able to access mental health support, a lack of break from caring, feeling very isolated and lonely and not part of their community. They also reported issues with shopping and prescription collections. And I think you'll remember back in lockdown in March, people were unable to get online shopping because the slots were taken up really quickly, and that did cause quite a lot of anxiety. We've also seen an increase in adult safeguarding referrals, and when we looked at those in more detail, they involved both carers and the cared for as both victims and perpetrators. And what I would say is, in the feeling from the safeguarding team, is that this isn't purposeful. This is just carers on the brink who are drained and they just don't feel that they can cope anymore. We've seen an increased proportion of contacts from carers of people living with dementia of some 19%. And overall, when I've looked at the contacts into our single point of access, since April, we've had a 29% increase in carers' contacts. And over 60% of those have been for a full carers assessment. So it's not just been, can I have a bit of information and advice? It's, I'm really, really struggling and I need an assessment in my own right. And I'm sure you can appreciate the impact on adult social care to try and meet those responsibilities. And again, I go back to the point, this was all before lockdown, again, that was announced last weekend. So looking at what we've done locally, at the start of lockdown, we had no choice but to close down many of our daycare services. Staff were redeployed and providers did their level best to make regular contact with individuals. But I'm sure you can appreciate that being in the house all day, not able to access your community, and caring for somebody with dementia especially, or very challenging behaviour, really impacted on our local carers. Some carers ceased respite with care homes, and indeed many of the care homes couldn't take people into them because they feared the spread of COVID and passing it on to people who came in for respite. We had to cease face-to-face statutory carers assessments. We did, however, resort to using the likes of Zoom and FaceTime and telephone assessments, but that can't take away from the fact that sometimes going into somebody's house and seeing the reality of what is actually happening is more beneficial, but we weren't able to do that. Many carers reported to us that they were unable to spend their personal budgets because we were in lockdown. A lot of the things that they would have ordinarily spent a personal budget on. For example, a short break or going swimming, massages, all those sorts of things. They weren't able to do that because the services were simply closed. The third sector also had to close their support groups and their meetings. And again, they did their best to put everything online that they could. And I can talk through some of the things that they did. And some of the third sector carers events, such as Arts and Crafts Day, they were all stopped as well. In regards to learning disabilities as well, we need to recognise that a number of the residential colleges closed, and that actually meant that some very challenging people with learning disability or autism actually were sent home to live with their families. And that is still the case in some examples that I've seen. And Shared Lives had to stop providing daycare as well because of CQC guidelines and the risk of spreading infection.
Sorry, sorry, Hayley, I do
Yes.
apologise. Can I come in a second? We don't appear to be seeing any slides.
Chairman, we are having some technical difficulties.
Okay, that's fine. Just wanted to, in case it was just me. The other thing is, if during the presentation, can you all please switch off your microphones? Thank you very much. And sorry, Ruth, I should have said before, if you wish to show your, it would be great if you would like to show your face. It's important that people see people.
It's not coming up, I'm afraid.
Oh, no problem. Okay, right.
I
Sorry.
can hear you, and as long as you can hear me, that's the main thing.
We can indeed. Let's proceed. Thank you very much.
Okay, so looking at how we've adapted locally to support carers, we did very quickly mobilise and adapt so that we could meet our statutory responsibilities. And in that regard, we haven't enacted what we call Care Act easements. Care Act easements were a tool that the government gave local authorities in recognition that throughout lockdown, we might not be able to carry out some functions, but we were able to adjust. And apart from daycare, we met all of our statutory duties. So we haven't enacted Care Act easements as of yet, and I'm quite proud of that fact. We did move into telephone contact, and that replaced face-to-face visits. And we did move people around our services so that we could offer people as much information and advice as we possibly could. Our single point of access remained open, and we quickly mobilised and began to work with the likes of the Carers Support Alliance and the Alzheimer's Society. And we introduced some flexibility in how carers could spend their direct payment. And some families, to give you an example, came to us to say that actually they had been furloughed and that they were able to take on more caring responsibilities for some of their family neighbours and the like. And so we actually gave flexibility in how people could use their direct payment to get more informal support, which we thought was really important to do. Phone support and telephone calls by statutory and third sector, we quickly mobilised that. In addition to that, our Learning Disability Service identified the most vulnerable carers and the cared for, and started to make weekly welfare calls to make sure that both carers and cared for were safe. Facebook groups were quickly established by Carers Support Alliance so that as much as possible they could provide online peer support. And face-to-face activities were switched off and they went online as well, again by Carers Support Alliance and the Alzheimer's Society. So they did virtual coffee mornings and singing groups. But I think that we need to recognise, Chair, that many of our older carers especially either don't have a computer or they really don't know how to access some of these online facilities. So moving into winter, and I wrote this pre-lockdown, we do need to make sure that carers can take breaks. And we are looking, and I'm working with Gerald to look at what services we are able to bring back online in a COVID safe manner. We have been providing very clear guidance and information and advice for carers, and I would say for our care providers as well. Gerald's team has done a fantastic job of supporting some of our care providers who have no doubt struggled throughout COVID. They've had staff who have become infected, they've had residents who have become infected, and some of them have suffered financially throughout COVID as well. And I just want a recognition that Gerald's team has done a huge amount of work in that arena. I think nationally there are calls on the government to raise the level of carers allowance. Carers allowance at the moment is only £67.25 a week. There is a cap on how much you can earn to receive carers allowance, and you have to provide at least 35 hours a week, which I think that is the equivalent nearly of a full-time job before you can access carers allowance. Support for carers, I think, to look after their own health and well-being is essential, especially as we're going back into lockdown again, especially in regards to mental health support. And again, looking at the data for the first quarter of this year, we've seen a 19% increase in mental health referrals to adult social care and the mental health partnership, and that is quite significant, and that is on top of the 29% increase in carers referrals. So I hope that gives you an indication of the impact on adult social care at the moment. We do need to ensure, and this is nationally recognised, that we're better able to ensure that carers can juggle their work responsibilities whilst remaining in the workplace. And overall, I think we need adequate funding for social care over this winter period. So looking at young carers and young adult carers, the Carers Trust has made recommendations in regard to them as well, especially in more support to manage their mental health and greater support from education providers. And by that, they mean the schools, colleges and universities, because generally it is recognised that young carers are not always picked up by educational facilities. And it's not talked about much in schools either. So bringing it back to what we need to do in North Somerset, and these are just a few of my thoughts. Overall, I think that we need to think of carers in regards to helping them to thrive and not just survive. And I heard that on a conference a week or two ago, and it just resonated with me that they have a life and we should support them in that life. It's not about surviving on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. We are looking at refreshing our carers strategy in partnership with carers and other organisations. And to that end, we have got a questionnaire that we're planning to send out to carers. And with the agreement of the chair, I'd like to send it around Ash for your comments to see if there's anything else that you would like us to include in the questionnaire before we send that out, because I think, Chair, that will influence what Ash can do for us, because it will be the real lived experience of carers and what they think we need to do to support them. I think that there's much more that we can do with local employers to ensure that they are flexible with their staff around carers leave and carers commitments. We have got that in the council, but more broadly, I don't think that we've really engaged with our local employers to recognise carers. We could arrange or talk about providing PPE for informal carers. And in the context of carers, we had advice and guidance that came out from government last night in regards to daycare. And we think that we might be able to facilitate and keep some services open in a COVID-free manner. And Gerald and I are looking at that. And the other thing that you've probably heard on the national news throughout COVID is the business of some families not being able to go and see people in residential and nursing care. And in that broadest context, I raise that because a number of people in residential and nursing care are still supported by the carer who they used to live with. And so that has had a significant impact, not only on the carer, but that person in that setting who probably hasn't seen their loved one for quite a significant period of time. And again, Gerald and his team have been very good in this space, giving advice about visiting in care homes. And we have tried to facilitate families speaking to people on Zoom and FaceTime. But as you can imagine, for somebody with a dementia or a memory loss, that can be as equally confusing, seeing somebody on a screen. Some of the advice that came out from government last night was about families being able to visit people in an outside setting. But as you can imagine, with torrential rain and bad weather, that's probably not really going to happen.
No.
So again, as I just alluded to, we are looking to see how we can safely maintain some of our day services so that we can give people some respite. We are evaluating as we speak how we can resume face-to-face assessments, and I've made the decision to keep the Motex Centre open. So even if people don't feel comfortable with social workers and occupational therapists visiting them at home, they can come into the Motex Centre. It's been assessed this week and it is COVID safe, and so I can see no reason to close that. We will continue to be flexible with the use of direct payments. And looking more broadly, Chair, at what Ash can do, and I think that was the conversation that me and you had a few weeks ago, I do think that we need to continue to lobby government on the funding for social care and reform. As you all know, Chair, we're only going to get a one-year spending review again, which is extremely disappointing because it doesn't allow me and Gerald to plan for our services over the next 2 to 3 years, which I think we need. We need stability for adult social care and particularly for carers. We really do need to continue to lobby government on raising the profile of carers, given the statistics that I've outlined to you today. I think locally we could have a conversation about carers' passports. I've seen these used elsewhere in the country, and it can be something such as a carer's card that gives you discounts in shops. It allows you access to some leisure facilities at discounted rates, and lots of other things. And you can use it if a loved one goes into hospital. You can show your carer's card so that health staff know straight away that you are a carer. So I think that that's something that we could consider locally. I really also think that we need to get the CCG on board because of what I've discussed with you around people's physical and mental health. And I think there's a recognition in the CCG that they probably haven't focused enough attention in this area. I also think that there's some work that we could do with primary care and talking to them about the recognition of carers. And as I said to you, although it isn't in the GP contracts, I think we could leverage some support around that to ensure that everybody is asked about their carer status. And as I said, I think that we can send out a questionnaire to try and establish locally what it is our carers actually want, rather than us as officers or Ash thinking that we know. I think it's better to go out and actually lobby our carers personally and ask them what they would like. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Hayley.
If I may, at some point, Chairman, when you're ready.
Yes, indeed. Extraordinary insight. For those who may not have read it, Hayley provided me with a copy of the, and I think to all members, of the King's Fund report regarding the Health and Social Care Committee. What struck me immediately was the statement from the King's Fund that in 20 years, 12 white papers and green papers and 5 independent reviews and commissions had still not provided any lasting solution to the problems in social care that have actually been implemented. Nothing. So it is going to be down to us more, particularly in this short term as a local authority and with our partners who are out there doing so much of the work at the coalface. So we'll take questions at this point, and we'll begin with Councillor Willis.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. So thank you for that, Hayley. As some of you know, I've been a carer since I was 15 and a half years old, and I'm still doing it now for a husband who I'm caring for. And I'm disappointed, very disappointed, that we still haven't got there. I struggled when I was a young carer because it wasn't recognised in 1969. Nobody knew what that was. I was finished school and was told I would ruin my life and I'd become nothing because I chose to take care of my sick mother and a baby brother. I proved that wrong, so that shut that headmaster up, I'm pleased to say. But it still doesn't change where we are now in the process. CCG, just after it became from
You're joking.
agreed with all doctors, all surgeries, GP surgeries, there will be a flag marker put on patient's notes. That was agreed and it was put in place. Yes, it's not in their contract, but they agreed there was a flag marker on there to say this person is caring for someone. And I'm disappointed that that has disappeared for whatever reason. That was a big power for us that we got in as North Somerset Council from the ASH panel. We had it put in. I'm also disappointed the carer's card, the passport Hayley's spoken about. We also had that in place as well for our leisure centres. We were using the carers' cards. They were having a discount, I think you could go in for 25% of the cost for all of our leisure centres. That was put in place and we used that. And we had I had a personal conversation with First Bus who agreed that carers on a carer's card were allowed, discount travelling if they weren't of an age where they had a free pass. And that included the young carers as well. We also did, as a council, we used to do a big part linked with Crossroads, who was such a loss when they went. For Carers' Rights Day, which is in December, it used to be around the first week in December, National Carers' Rights Day, and we used to do some really big whole day events on that, and we used to use Brandon's Trust and People First and all sorts, and put on Carers' Rights Days as community cafes, and we used to pick up so many people there. So, we have done stuff in the past that has been really successful, and I know it's fallen by the wayside, but perhaps we can look at some of those things again. And the other thing that I put in place that never really took off because of Crossroads finishing, and it went to Alliance and one thing and another, was a buddy carer. So as we could have a telephone call, as has been happening in COVID, where we've had people in the community have rung a neighbour that they know's on their own to say, just ringing you for a chat and a check. Buddy carers, when you're stuck at home, know what it's like. You're stuck at home and you just need somebody to talk to. Sometimes it's a cry, sometimes it's a hysterical laugh, sometimes it's a vent. But it's really helpful to just have somebody on the end of the phone who could say, go on, off you go, I'm listening. And, how many councillors are we? 50, 51? If we all rang 2 people, we've got to quite a few. And that's just us, isn't it? So those are my comments and suggestions. And for the care homes, I know that is a real issue. And having lost my mum-in-law just at the start of COVID, I'm only grateful that I didn't have to go through that. So thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Hayley.
Thank you very much, Councillor Willis. Councillor James, then Councillor Harrison, then Habson, then Caroline Cherry. Councillor Cherry.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chair. There's so much to touch on just because we don't really discuss carers usually. There hasn't been an opportunity before. The bit I'm focused on to start off with, access to help for carers at the moment. So Care Connect is currently used for general resident support as well as everyday carers, and also a huge amount of people calling 111. So for Care Connect, do we know that whether carers have been able to access the phone line when they've needed to over lockdown, and 111 locally, do we give carers priority support? I know that's something sorry, this is a bit of a HOSP question, but we wouldn't ask this in the HOSP because it's care focus. Do carers get 111 priority access locally, especially during lockdown?
Hayley.
I don't know.
Okay,
Is my answer.
I'll transfer those questions over to HOSP.
Right, who was next? Karen.
Yes, just thank you very much, Ruth. I was really impressed by your suggestions and totally support what you're, based on your own experience, suggesting. So thank you very much for enlightening us with that. Also, I was absolutely staggered at the scale. This is 1 in 10 of our residents who are carers. It's 10%. It's absolutely staggeringly huge number. So, you know, it's almost all of us, really. So we all need to try and do our best. Now, this buddy system, if I can stick my hand up, if anybody could put me in touch with a few people in my local area, I'm more than happy to give anybody a ring. If anybody wants a buddy, I wouldn't know where to start to do this, but if anybody who can organise this will put me on that list, I'm more than happy to do that. And finally, just the contact, being able to visit in care homes, which I think is obviously a huge national issue and really important. And if we can facilitate that safely, as I understand it, if you air a bill, I mean, the issue is obviously being in an enclosed room together. With not much social distancing, but if I understand it correctly, if you open the windows every 20 minutes and air the room very thoroughly, plus social distancing, plus masks, it is actually relatively safe. So if we can possibly facilitate that, I would support that wholeheartedly, because I think the quality of life is incredibly important at that stage when you are in that situation. So it's not just the length of your life, it's the quality of your life as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Cherry.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hayley, for a very informative talk. And I must admit, this was one of the reasons why when I first started as a councillor, I decided to work in this area, because I actually met residents who were locked behind their doors looking after very seriously ill relatives with dementia, and they could barely get to the door to speak to me, and I started to appreciate it. I am, in fact, also particularly concerned about young carers. And I think what I can't establish, or from what you're saying, is do we have a proper list of young carers? I'm thinking particularly because I have some experience of this. There are children who are looking after their parents with mental health issues. And I'm just wondering, should I ask through HOSP, as Hugh was saying, or do we know how many young children carers that we have in North Somerset? And do we differentiate between mental health care or just physical care? And also, my concern is that during the lockdown, things get extremely difficult, because we know that the numbers for mental health concerns are rocketing. So I'm just wondering, could you let me know how we identify them apart from through the schools? Thanks, Hayley.
Do you have any immediate response to that, Hayley, or is it something that you would need to look at back in the office?
I think, Chair, that would probably need a conversation with Sheila Smith as the Director of Children's Services, because we deal with the young and the adult carers from 18. So I think that would be a question for children. But Councillor Cherry, going back to what you were saying, in terms of mental health and physical health, we don't distinguish. We do a holistic assessment of physical and mental health needs, and will make the appropriate referral if it needs secondary mental health support. And I do also recognise, as you said, that we've got some quite poorly carers actually, who throughout COVID have been under significant pressure. And also to bear in mind that many of our residents have had elective surgery cancelled throughout COVID, and some people have been reluctant to even approach their GP or health services if they haven't been feeling well. And I don't think yet we fully understand the long-term impact of some of that work. In addition to that, there's also evidence to suggest that for some people who were vulnerable anyway, if they have had COVID, it could affect their cognitive abilities in the longer term. And these are all of the sorts of things that I think we don't know at the moment what the impact will be, but I think it will cause additional pressure for adult social care going forward. So I just want to make that point as well. I think, Councillor Willis, going back to your comments about the flag on the GP records, I think there is a flag on the GP records, but for me, Councillor Willis, it's not just about having a flag, it's about, does that flag result in a meaningful conversation with that person when they go to their GP? And that's where I'm not convinced that is always happening. And I think in regards to some of the discounts you talked about, I think some of those have been discontinued over time, but we need to bear in mind that they're likely to be discontinued even more following COVID due to the loss of income that a lot of our leisure centres and bus services are experiencing at the moment. So I'm trying to preempt some of these things actually happening. And I think, Councillor Havison, you asked about Care Connect, and I can give you confidence that that has been fully operational throughout COVID. And we supplemented some Care Connect by working at the weekends in early COVID. And we also used some of our adult social care staff to make contact with people who were originally on the shielded list. So we contacted significant numbers, I'm talking about thousands of people who we identified as being vulnerable. And we had support from other areas in the council to do that, because we were able to go through the council tax register, look at people by their age and whether they had got a single person's discount. So we identified those people as probably being more vulnerable than a lot of other people. So we did an awful lot of work in that space around contacting carers and the cared for. And you're quite right when you look at the figures around the number of carers in North Somerset, it is around 10%. But can I say, the number of carers that we've got in North Somerset are only those that have identified themselves and told us they're carers. There's potential that there's several thousand more who we don't even know about. So I just wanted to make those few points for you.
Thank you very much. Hugh, I will come to you, but can I just ask Georgie, what's your perspective on this? Do you have one based on what Hayley has described?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I think Hayley's presentation is something, unfortunately, that we're fairly familiar with. It's been interesting because there's been Health Watch conference this week. In fact, it's still going today. It's a 4-day conference, and we've heard quite a lot of the, unfortunately, it's relatively common around the country. It isn't unique, unfortunately, to North Somerset. But I think it's, some of the information that Hayley has given us will be a very good starting point for us to start focusing on some particular areas that we can help with both communication. And also, I'm very interested, Hayley, in your survey, because I think it's absolutely true that we don't know who all carers are. I mean, I can say that for myself because over the years, I've cared for both my husband and both sets of parents, and never had an assessment or claimed anything, because most people do not, and unless there's this barrier to doing it. So I think there's the hidden carers, and I think for us that's where the vulnerabilities lie. So I wondered whether it might help, Chairman, if I could do some trawling of, I know some work has been done in other areas by Health Watches, to see what the outcomes they had from their pieces of work. And once I've trawled through those, bring them to you to see if there's anything there that would be of use, obviously informally, but you could have those as some information that might spark some ideas or some thoughts about how we can tackle this. But very offer to help, very keen to help on a local basis, where we can reach those that are actually caring, particularly those we haven't identified.
I think that's very helpful, Georgie. Be most grateful for that. It touches upon some discussions that Hayley and I have had in the recent past regarding what, some form of inquiry event, whatever, but that would be very helpful and a good starting point. Thank you. Councillor James, followed by Councillor Cato.
Does John want to go first, just because I've spoken already?
Oh, yes, if that's kind. Thank you. John?
Thank you very much. First off, Hayley, I really appreciate your report and your presentation. I'm absolutely, to be frank, I'm absolutely shocked by it. Really, I feel like this is Britain and not some third world country. I'm just absolutely astounded how poorly nationally we are taking care of our people. I'd like to ask if perhaps as an outcome to this meeting, if there were, maybe yourself could think of 3 maybe key things that we as councillors, not only on this call, but as in our councillor group, the 49 of us, could actually do to take some positive action to make some kind of difference, whether that's lobbying or whatever it is. I would love us like a 3-point, this is the top 3 things that we could do. So just a thought, just a request, really. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Hayley? Well, would you want to... Sorry, did you want
I think,
to time considering that?
Yeah, we can consider it. I'll speak to Gerald about it and we'll come up with that. Are you thinking during COVID, Councillor Cato, or more broadly?
I was thinking right now we have the situation that exists. We've had this situation going on for a long time, so there's a long-term situation to deal with, probably. and I respect that, you'll have a better understanding of the thing than I will. But also, right now, it's just this notionally, it's just this month of lockdown. But that clearly is not the issue. The issue is far bigger and wider than that, and we need to do something serious, really. I cannot believe it. What did you say? That a carer gets 67.25 a week?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, can we imagine one of our local MPs, for example, living on 67.25 a week?
No.
I mean, and let them step up to it and live on 67.25 a week. To me, it's just astoundingly shocking. I was brought up in Kenya. I swear it must be better in Kenya for sure. And I tell you, Kenya's not good.
John,
I'm astounded. Sorry.
Mentioned earlier, it's probably worth having to add to your knowledge and understanding. It's probably worth looking at the King's Fund paper if you haven't already, and look at where Britain sits, the UK sits within. There's a particular graph there that is fascinating. Right. And whilst it may look like we are, we're next to Germany, and they're okay. Their circumstances are different, and much of Europe, particularly in Southern Europe, there is a significant investment by families in each other that we do not have in this country, or if we do, it's negligible to a great extent. Sorry, I'm going off on one.
Yeah,
Hugh.
thank you.
So I was just going to raise the fact, the more general issue of the carer's voice. So I think this survey is really good because it's important to take lead from carers rather than sort of talk down, this is what you probably want. But more generally, do you think that carers have a voice in this council, other than obviously conversations with yourself probably, and your team? Do carers have a strong voice? Is there a better practice that we could follow? And have we had a carers, I've already asked this to outside the meeting, but have we had a carers champion in the past? Is this something we should be doing, so someone's constantly focusing on this throughout their time on the council, opposed to us just sort of ad hoc, there's a meeting about carers, better care about carers today, that sort of thing. And the other question, if that's all right, this is the final one, what's the transition like for young carers to adult services in North Somerset, and how has that changed over lockdown? Because I imagine that transition is much harder over lockdown than it would be outside of lockdown.
Okay. Are you happy that I come back on those, Chair?
Yeah, sure.
Yes,
that's fine.
Yes.
Could I come in again, Chairman, when there's a moment?
Yes. And I was going to say, on the issue of champions and so forth, Ros, you may have some experience of this.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I for Hugh, and others, I was the carers champion at one point throughout my career in the, as they call it, in the council. So I have been the carers champion, and it was really helpful because it enabled you to sit on different carers groups, the carers strategy group, which was a big group that the council had with actual carers on there, as well as myself being a carer and the official. So it really worked well. We used to work it, with officers, and it used to get a lot of information back for the council that we wouldn't normally be able to get. So for that one, yes, there has been in the past, and I think for members to be those champions for different areas, whether it be carers, mental health or whatever, I think it's really important. It's good for the outside bodies to know who you are, so as they can come to you instead of going to 15 people and dissipating it out. It's better to have one person to deal with it and then dissipate it out, if you see what I mean. And for hidden carers, I think the issue has always been hidden carers. We don't know how many there are. We don't know who is a carer. And for a lot of young carers, looking after parents, it is a fact of the parents say, don't get the council involved, don't get social services involved. And the fear is, for young carers, having been there myself, that the fear is you're going to be taken away and put into care somewhere, foster care, because the situation isn't right. And I think a lot of the fear that is there because of hidden carers are those reasons, and even for adults as well. If you've got older older carers. It's the worry that social services are going to come in and take you over, which we know as counsellors is for the best reasons and safeguarding. I've learned it in my time here now, where I was the other side of it thinking, I don't want the council in here, I don't want them coming in interfering. And I'm on the other side of it now, and I see that it doesn't work like that. But I think it is still very much that bit about somebody taking you over and the frightening side of it. So we've had numerous discussions in the past about how to do that. And the only way to do that is to have those continual conversations when we can, I think. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. If I may, members, I'd like to draw this discussion to a conclusion.
If it's all right, Chair, Hayley Varico was just about to reply to me before that. I don't suppose Hayley still wants to respond.
Yes.
Yes,
I can.
Oh, and
Okay,
I see
so,
Mike Bell's got his hand raised.
Okay. So, Councillor James, I think in terms of the transition aspect, just before lockdown, well, literally on the day of lockdown, we actually brought the carers service back in-house. Because I really wanted to raise the profile of the service, especially in regard to statutory carers assessment. And so we successfully brought that in-house, and we're recruiting additional posts, which I think will enable us to identify those young carers coming into the adult care service much better than we ever have before. So I think that will raise the profile within the council. And on your other point, the carers strategy group has also been re-established. I think that group died a bit of a death, but we've re-established it, and we had the first meeting about 3 weeks ago. And it was part of my recommendation to the chair that we engage with that group if we are to have an inquiry day or something of that nature. Going back to Councillor Cato's point, you did ask me about anything that members could do now. And I suppose there's two things that I would strongly encourage you to do. One of those is to ask your residents, if they are struggling and they are a carer, please contact the council and ask for a carer's assessment. We can only help you if we know that you're struggling. So please do encourage them to phone Care Connect, and they will get put through to the carer's service, and somebody will give them some information and advice and guidance. And if they need a full assessment, that will be arranged. But we only can help if we know that you're struggling. The second one I would say is, please encourage your residents to attend their GP if they're not well, and please encourage them to go to hospital appointments, because we are hearing that the message around Save the NHS, a lot of vulnerable people are interpreting that as don't go to an appointment or don't approach anybody, wait until COVID's over. That can have very detrimental health impacts for people. So I would strongly encourage you to tell people, if you're not well, seek help.
Thank you, Hayley. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mark. I just wanted to quickly come back on the suggestion about a member champion for carers. I think that's a really good suggestion, and I'll take that away and talk to Hayley about how we can make that happen. We've been keen to have member champions appointed by full council so that we've got really good corporate-wide buy-in to the champion role now. So we'll definitely look at that, and I think that's a really helpful suggestion. So thanks, Ros.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Let's move on. But thank you very much to all of you for your input into that. For me, it's number one issue, but let's progress. So, Gerald, we have the Winter Plan Assurance, Service Continuity and Care Market Review and Self-Assessment by Councils. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Obviously, it slips off the tongue easily, doesn't it? I mean, this obviously complements in many ways the presentation that Hayley has just given in terms of, I'm not sure the phrase is fully appropriate, but if we view the informal carers market and then in effect the more formalised care or commissioned care that we provide, clearly the absolute value of that informal care it's so huge that it would without that the care market would completely collapse in the way that it is at the moment, struggling through the challenges that it faces. So the two are very much complementary and in nearly all circumstances interface very closely. And of course, in terms of the government requirements for these two documents, there is obviously part of the assessment is also in terms of the services that we provide for carers. In writing this report and providing you with the two documents that we have been asked to complete and assess our preparedness this winter in terms of our care provider market and its sustainability, and secondly to support our winter planning process to provide a template or reassurance around how we have delivered our winter planning arrangements. And that's in a threefold environment that is regionally as part of the ADAS community to provide a regional assurance around our winter planning at very much for Hayley and I the BNSG interface and the winter planning in terms of our local health and social care community via Healthier Together, etc. And then obviously locally in terms of our corporate planning arrangements for winter planning, Brexit and obviously the COVID infection. So it's very much an area that we are focused on throughout. But in providing those documents, I did highlight the fact that we had a very contemporaneous report from the House of Commons Health and Social Care Committee, which is referenced and comments there, and that does actually very much summarise what a huge challenge our care market is having and our care providers are having in terms of the arrangements that they are in place, and some of the difficulties that around market failure, which has been a reality for social care providers in recent years, and probably is the most significant challenge we face in North Somerset as elsewhere. From the two detailed documents that you have, I have extracted in the report what has been our local contingency planning arrangements, and you will have bullet pointed there a range of activity that we've undertaken to support our care providers, and I think that has been well received. We've recently have done a review with our providers, so we have met with all our domiciliary care providers, not just our strategic providers. We've met with our care home providers and our sort of more complex housing support providers around lessons that we could learn from the first round of COVID as we go into the second round. And I think there were lessons for us as well in terms of communication, but actually the feedback was very positive in terms of the support they got from North Somerset Council. So that's pleasing to hear. You have a range of areas that we have we've set up over the time. PPE was obviously a critical area, and we've provided support there with Catherine and her finance team. We have distributed exceptional payments, particularly to the care home sector, but across the board, and subsequently have distributed the infection control grants that have been available to care providers who have found that an essential support to keep them going. I won't go into all of the details around that, but happy to take any questions on that summary of activity that we've undertaken. Again, in terms of the self-assessment of our market, I think probably the highest risk area, as you would have expected, hasn't been domiciliary care, but it has been residential nursing care, particularly for older people. We currently, in terms of, we now, as part of those measures of assurance that we've looked at, we support all of our care providers to provide information around their capacity. So they all submit on a at least once a week, if not more regularly, details on the capacity tracker, and we monitor that in terms of support to our providers. Currently, that represents 83% occupancy. For a thriving care home community, they will be looking at numbers of around 95, 93%. So you can see that that's significantly below the numbers that they need in terms of long-term sustainability. So there is a clear challenge, a clear risk around the care markets. We know that we are commissioning less residential nursing placements, and the drop is even greater in terms of self-funders. So it is a significant challenge for the care home market. We know that the infection control grant will continue till the end of March, but it has reduced. It is the second wave of the infection control is roughly half of the first round, and that is a challenge for our care market. We do notice that across BNSG, the recovery in terms of placements has been stronger in Bristol and notably South Gloucestershire. South Gloucestershire is more like 87%. So we probably face the most difficult challenge around that risk. And we will be monitoring very closely to see that services are continuing. We are currently dealing with one what is described as a temporary closure, but in effect it is a closure of a care home, and the implications around moving patients during the COVID period is even more challenging. But I can assure you that process is progressing smoothly, and we don't anticipate further problems. Clearly, the risk is if we suffer more market failure in that space. We're also aware, obviously, as we move into the second phase of COVID, around the pressure on the health and social care system generally, and with regards to the acute sector in particular. And Hayley and I and myself are in negotiations currently around what additional support we can do around discharge arrangements, and possibly that might offer some relief to some of our care providers if there is an opportunity to look at additional provision to support the hospital discharge arrangements. If in the worst scenarios or the worst modelling at the moment, the acutes do struggle in terms of the demand picture. But that will be a challenge, as you can appreciate. Domiciliary care has fared better during the COVID period.
And a blanket.
Sorry, can you hold on one moment, please, Gerald? Can all of you please, at this present time, switch off your microphones? We seem to be getting some conversational feedback. Sorry, Gerald.
Yeah. Whilst during the initial period there was a drop in domiciliary care activity, primarily because families during lockdown in effect took on some of those carers' responsibilities. Again, a segue into what Hayley was referencing. That has returned, and actually we are seeing less difficulty with placing domiciliary care, and are, as part of our winter planning and health supported funding, are putting a big recruitment campaign into supporting our domiciliary care providers to recruit staff particularly given the economic implications of the second wave and potential impact on hospitality posts, etc. So there is an opportunity in terms of trying to encourage a career in care, and we need to take advantage of those opportunities that the COVID experience has read. So you have in the two appendices the assessment of where we are, and I think whilst I think that is the biggest risk in terms of the care home market, I think we are reasonably assured that we are on top of the issues, but we do face a degree of uncertainty around what is going to happen over the winter. The second document, as I say, we were able to give the assurance around our winter planning arrangements, as I said, on those 3 tiers, and are completing the template that I've given you with regards to the areas of activity that we would need to provide those assurances. I will share the completed final documents as soon as possible, but if there were any queries around either of those documents, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Gerald. Could I just begin with something that Leo very kindly sent round, which was a piece in The Independent that I hope you were all able to look at that, which highlighted the implications of new adult social care winter plan regarding the hot care homes to which COVID-19 patients may be discharged to, and that we would, I think, have to provide them in some way. And I know that prompted serious concern from Red Cross and Health Watch and so forth. Teaspoons of salt need to be taken, I'm sure, with this one, but are you aware of it? Is there some signal coming from government that they expect us to move 1,100 people who've been discharged from hospital to Butlins?
Right, I'm not sure I've seen the article, but the what I think you're referring to is what's known as the designated facility,
yes,
which is a responsibility that adult social care has in terms of meeting its requirements around a place of safety for COVID positive patients from discharge. That has been so it's an interesting challenge because we have identified a facility and are in detailed negotiations and further meetings this week with that particular care home that would offer those facilities. I would stress that they would be subject to an assurance process from CQC, which I believe has put a lot of care providers off. And I guess the media coverage of this is the question of can you provide a designated facility is one that from a health and social care perspective has been, well, is that the appropriate question and is that an appropriate solution? And is it right to have a separate place for individuals that are COVID positive? And is it not better to try to manage that either in the home or in a facility where appropriate infection control processes are in place? It does by definition require a location for someone that isn't necessarily where they're going to have their long-term care needs met. So it's messy and there is an awful lot of debate across the country about whether it's an appropriate solution. However, we have, as I said, tried to meet the government requirements with regards to a designated facility, and the service that we believe, and I'm not going to name them because I think it's unfair, and it's still commercially sensitive, and as such, you know, there could be issues around whether that service ever happens for a variety of reasons. However, to give you a little bit of feel for that, it's a home that has suffered quite badly during the earlier stage of COVID. So it has a staff group and an existing client group that have a very high level of previous COVID positive status, which obviously gives a degree of assurance, but not completely, given we know now that that there is a sell-by date in terms of the protection around that. They also, rather uniquely, have, they believe, the insurance cover, which has been the most difficult aspect of providing a designated facility, because the insurance sector has been quite spooked by the experiences of the care homes in recent months, and the thought of a care home being designated, or in any other facility, being designated a COVID positive hotspot is obviously not attractive to insurance brokers that perhaps are
I can imagine.
Are slightly risk averse. However, this care home had the foresight to put in a pandemic clause. I think the owner had previous experience as an insurance broker, so obviously knew what they were doing. So they may be uniquely in a place where they can take forward the designated facility. However, as I say, it is receiving mixed support from some of our health colleagues and some of our infection control experts within the CCG as whether that is the most appropriate, and whether we would be better leaving the current arrangements around ensuring that testing is in place as rapidly as possible before discharge, and ensuring that infection control for the 14 days is robust within any care home setting, but most importantly, the care home setting where that individual is likely to remain for the foreseeable future. I think if we can achieve a designated facility, I think that will be an additional option that we will have. And as I said, given current demand implications on the acute sector in the last few days, all of our hospital and our whole health and social care system is in OPAL 4, which is the highest level of risk. The proportion of patients with COVID is rising in terms of the acute capacity, and as you're aware, it's a fragile system at the best of times, particularly in the winter. That we are live contingency planning around what additional capacity and options we could put in place. Some of those are around utilising vacancies within some of our larger care homes, and we are actively pursuing that at the moment. It's also we're also as part of expanded a living care option. So we now have available a range of living care options to support, which could again be an option with regards to COVID positive patients. That can be available within 24 hours, and obviously has the added advantage of ensuring that people are at home, they're returned back home, and they're with their loved ones. But does provide a level of professional care support 24/7. So that's an option that we have already expanded, and will, as part of our further contingency planning, look to block further if we get support from the CCG, which I believe we will.
Thank you very much, Gerald. Gosh, it's right. I must carry on. Any questions from members, please? Anyone want to
please,
send
sir.
the issues that Gerald has highlighted?
If I may, sir. Hello.
Is that Councillor Willis?
Yes, it is. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, if I may, I have one for Gerald on the full cost of the PPE that the council supplied. So if you don't want to do it now, could you send it out to us? I'd like to know what the costs have been so far of our PPE we've been supplying, and also did it come from overspender reserves within council, or was there some government grant funding? What was used in the end, please? I know I had some figures early on when I asked, but I haven't asked since, so thank you.
I can't remember off the top of my head what the total value is at the moment, but I certainly will ensure that Councillor Willis gets those numbers. And
well, perhaps if the whole panel could get it, I think it'd be useful. Leo,
so you've got that number. The funding of PPE has changed over time. Initially, we were utilising, and to be clear, we were providing PPE as a last resort. Obviously, as you'll appreciate, in the early stages of the COVID experience, most providers were in that last resort, and we had to take some extensive research to access a fragile supply market for PPE, including obviously exporting PPE from China, which was the main source of PPE at the time. That fortunately went well, and we were able to provide that, and the funding of that was via the council's broader COVID funding at the initial stage. That has subsequently been supplemented by the infection control grant, which has provided directly for care providers to support, but equally they are now accessing what is now a more reliable supply of PPE provided by the government. So it has evolved over time. As I say, throughout the period, we have been the last resort for providers, but we have put in place quite a robust and welcomed by the providers dynamic system whereby within 24 hours we were able to deliver PPE from our Mediquip store for equipment. So that worked extremely well. And was appreciated by our providers, and meant that no provider, I think, at any stage was without the appropriate PPE, despite the fact that the guidance changed on a daily basis for the first few months.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you. Yes, we would be grateful if those figures could come to all members. That would be great. Thank you, Councillor Cherry.
Thank you very much. Thank you for explaining about the designated building. Can you confirm that we've actually got an agreement with the BNSTG that we will only have discharged into local care homes people who've had COVID tests, so that their status is absolutely clear before they get discharged? Do we get involved with that, or are we just keeping our fingers crossed?
Right. I mean, obviously, as I've just referenced, that the guidance with regards to PPE and the guidance with regards to hospital discharge have changed and evolved over time, and some will recall some of the issues around the earlier guidance. From the point at which the guidance clearly made it a requirement that testing had to take place within 48 hours to ensure that a hospital discharge patient was not COVID positive. We are assured that that always happens. There have been one or two mistakes, human error, which inevitably will happen. But we always ensure, so there is guidance that Hayley and I have over months have argued and advocated on behalf of the care sector, who, again, you will recall, in North Somerset were quite vocal about the appropriateness of discharge arrangements where that was ambiguous. So I think that has been in place now for several months, and it is understood by the acutes that that has to happen. I can assure you that our brokers ensure that we have had a guarantee from the relevant acute that the test has taken place and that it is negative. And with the exception of if we end up with a designated facility, and there are one or two care providers, not many in North Somerset, that would consider taking positive patients. Again, the difficulty with that is the insurance picture. If a home was to take a positive patient and subsequently an infection was to break out, their liability or their risk of challenge is that much greater.
You want to come back on that, Caroline?
Yes, just on the designated facility, will there be nurses or will it be care workers who are going to look after these large numbers of COVID patients?
I suspect that we're not talking large numbers, but it is a single care home that we've identified, with the addition of the living carer option, which would offer a community-based option. In both of those cases, there would be access to the wraparound support service. There would be a focus if it was a positive COVID facility. There would be a lot of engagement around the infection control services, both from the CCG, from our own public health colleagues, and from commissioners as well. So there would be a lot of support to that service. But it would be the care home staff. As I say, the one home that has identified that is in the not unique, but very limited number of services where I think all of their staff will have already tested positive over the recent months. Albeit, as we know, that doesn't give you 100% guarantee that there will not be a subsequent infection. So the requirement of appropriate infection control is just as important.
Thank you, Gerald. Thank you. Any other questions? Any other points to raise? No. Councillor Willis, do you want to follow up with any other questions?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Gerald. That's both presentations today have been extraordinary insights, and we are most grateful for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll move on to the panel's work plan at this stage. I'm sure you've all had a look at how things are progressing at the moment, but can I invite Councillor James to give us an insight into how things are progressing at the moment following the first meeting of the Housing Issues Group?
Yes, thank you. Two meetings now. Very sorry to have lost Mark Hughes from the team, but we're looking forward to seeing his successes, and he's let me know that that officers have been told to speak to us and Ash panel when it comes to the next work that goes on. Also, welcome to Mike as the new executive member for housing. So in terms of the work panel, we looked at the draft home choice policy. We made some small tweaks to that, and I think we recommended that they go to the Armed Forces champion when it came to changes to do with armed forces. We looked at enforcement policy. However, since then, obviously, I have had members ask whether we might be able to reopen licensing again and have a look into licensing. Now situations have changed recently, so we might be doing that in the future as part of our plan for future meetings. In the last meeting, I've just got the papers in front of me. In the last meeting, we talked about homelessness, and we had a really valuable contribution from Sarah LaRoff, who works at Citizens Advice Bureau. She was talking about the effect of this COVID legislation on housing, especially in terms of eviction. She says there's a real creep in low-level rent arrears across North Somerset, mostly in the private housing sector rather than social housing sector. That's something we need to be cautious about, but at least there's another month of lockdown now, so that provides some assurances to tenants that they're not about to be evicted anytime soon. I think that what was raised in that meeting that was important we need to cover in the future is, I don't know via this committee or I think probably COCO, we really need to look into antisocial behaviour. So I don't know if there's any chance that we can put that on our WAT plan or speak to other COCO to see if they can what they're doing to concentrate on antisocial behaviour at the moment. The same goes to domestic violence, and we've on this committee and on SIPs we've been really concerned with domestic violence and abuse. We just want to make sure that there's some scrutiny on that. I think this panel is the one to be focusing on that. So I wonder whether we might be able to have a meeting with officers to discuss domestic abuse in the area in focus. That might be also useful because obviously we've just changed provider, so it might be useful to look into that. Finally, unauthorised encampment policy. We had a first look at the unauthorised encampment policy. Mark Hughes has said that he and his officers are going to review the council's approach to unauthorised encampments. We gave our brief outline of things that we were concerned about and wanted to be focused on. It's it's only the start of the policy at the moment, so there's nothing really to take back to you here, but just that's going to happen, and future meetings will be, I think that's the area that housing officers have been, like Howard Evans, for instance, going to go to us in the future to focus on immediately. I don't know if that's a broad enough overview.
No, that's fine, Hugh. It's really, and I think that's what I feel is such a shame is that with Mark going, you did have a good working relationship with him. You were beginning to identify the issues of mutual concern and aspiration. So, but very well done, and I'm so pleased that it's functioning.
And this is probably an area we need to focus on, just because there's so much change. There's a change in officers, there's a change in executive member. So I imagine this is an area where we need to keep in pace with the amount of change that's probably going to happen quite quickly.
I think so. You're absolutely right. In terms of the issues yet to come, you're right about licensing. I think it is time now that we talked about this in the very early days of this panel, and Mark explained at the time why it wasn't appropriate, that in his opinion at that time, to deal with that, but it is appropriate now, and I can also say that the leader has also pressed the point with me that he feels it should be featured in the near future. But we'll need to have a conversation, as you say, about how we might progress these. And what I'm also concerned about is that we don't overburden the group, because if we overburden the group, we overburden the officers. So,
Chairman, if I may come in at some point, thank you.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Hugh. I'm a little upset this morning with my council because I received a copy of North Somerset Life yesterday, and on page 44 it says domestic abuse, and nothing's been learned, has it? We had the motion in January before the world went mad into council for victims, domestic abuse, male victims, lobbying, etc. And we have put out a publication this morning, and I'm bringing it in now because obviously Hugh has spoken of the issue. Second paragraph down, it says, each week 2 women are killed by a current or former partner. No mention of anyone else, no mention of male victims. Why have we not listened to what council did in January, where I was asked to put my motion in from the leader? In actual fact, it came in a request from the leader for me to put some work into it. So I am disappointed that the North Somerset Life has come out in times of lockdown. I've just spent from April the 5th until 2 weeks ago supporting one male member of domestic abuse within this area continually whilst lockdown and we're all shut up. And we've put out North Somerset Life, and we're not making our male victims think that it's them. My usual hobby horse, I'm afraid, but I am passionate about the situation of fairness, and I am bitterly disappointed this morning on page 41. Thank you, Chairman.
Although that'd be really useful to focus on also the fact that, I think a fifth of the usual number of domestic abuse crimes that usually come forward to the council have appeared at the moment. So we know that there's a huge underreporting generally. So that's why I think it really needs to be focused on.
Thank you. If somebody could take that forward, I would be grateful.
Yes, indeed. I think what it also highlights for me, and I don't know about other members, is the relationship that we have with the editorship of that particular publication. And as a panel, I've never had anyone come to me from it to say, what have you got to say? Is there something you want to say and communicate from that point of view? But thank you, Ros. It's a fair point, and we will address it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on with the panel. Sorry, are there any other issues that anyone would want to raise in relation to the housing issues group? Thank you. Moving on to the commissioning issues group, which the first meeting is scheduled for 12 noon on the 16th of November. All members are invited to that because it's an opportunity to begin to build with Gerald how this particular group will function and how it will serve the commissioning of forward plans and so forth. So I just wanted to remind you that and it will function in a similar way to the housing issues group. It will bring us close to the issues at hand, and for us to be able to respond more immediately to those needs, concerns, issues, aspirations, and so forth, rather than relying on a meeting like this every 3 or 4 months or whatever it is. Okay, so dates in diaries, and I'm sure they all are, 16th of November at 12 noon. Okay, and Gerald and his team will of course be leading on that and highlighting their perspective on things at the moment. Okay, so looking forward to that. The planning policy review task and finish group has been making progress. It's not major, but what it is a contribution to the local plan, particularly in relation to planning policies as it relates to vulnerable people and so forth. There are not going to be major changes, but there are 2 or 3 significant ones. One in particular that I've had a bugbear about, which is that as you're aware, if you live within a settlement's development boundary, you can have a granny annex pretty much anywhere you want. If you're outside of that, it has to be connected to the house. So that's certainly one that I think we can make a difference on. We have a meeting again shortly of that group to hear the feedback from Michael Reap and his team regarding their conclusions on what we achieved at the previous meeting. Disappointingly, in terms of attendance at that one, it was myself and Ian Parker. It would be good to have more input into it. Okay. That pretty much concludes what I have to say. What do you have to say on any of those issues? Nothing. Right. What I want to do is to take what we have been presented with in this opportunity, in this meeting.
Oh, Leo was just speaking, Chairman.
Sorry?
Leo was just speaking through.
Could I just briefly come in, Chairman?
Yes, Leo.
Just to say, to pick up, there are a couple of issues. First is to pick up the budget update that was circulated to members by Catherine Sokol. As I said in the email, it's really just to pick it up under work plan to see if there are any issues that members feel should be taken forward from that. And the second issue I just wanted to bring up was just to remind members that this is an opportunity to, this work plan is an opportunity for members to review the work plan as is, and to make any suggestions about other issues, particularly under sections 3, as to where members might feel that they want to go. And just also to pick up the earlier item on carers, do members have any thoughts on where we might go with this in terms of the work plan? So that was it.
Thank you, Leo. I have both of those at my notes on my left-hand side of my diary, and I wasn't looking on that side.
Mark?
So can I just clarify that point in level 3 of the plan? If there is something that we want to highlight for further scrutiny, examination, or policy making or policy helping, then the most helpful way to do that is for members to provide us with a simple, straightforward briefing note that says, this is the issue, this is why I think it is an issue, and here are some proposals about how we might address it. That's what we need, simply from a management point of view of that. It really is great to some extent in terms of enthusiasm when people say, what we should really do, Mark, is deal with X, Y, and Z. I need a bit more to that because there are a number of people saying it. So, and then it is for us as a panel to determine whether we are going to bring that forward through stage 2, stage 1, and so forth. So that's just a kind of reminder from that point of view. Okay.
Mark, can you hear me?
Yes.
Councillor Ruth Jacobs.
Hello,
Can you
Ruth.
hear me? Hi.
Yes,
Can I just ask you, you said at the beginning that there was a vacancy on ASH. Now, I'm not on the ASH panel. And my expertise, as you know, is in rough sleeping and homelessness, which are two different things, I have to say. Could there be any way that I can be of assistance? Could I join, for instance?
Ruth, we've had these conversations. I'm very aware of your skills, experience, and expertise. I am advised that there is a process to this because of the political balance.
Yeah, understand.
That needs to be taken into account. And I need the guy, and I need feedback from the leader on that.
Yeah,
so
understand.
Rather than commit to anything at this point, may I come back to you on that? Hugh.
Yeah. If it's okay to just say, Councillor Crosby, Councillor Jacobs, you're welcome to attend any meeting of the Housing Issues Group. We've currently got no Conservative representation, so I implore you, please do attend the Housing Issues Group.
If you can let me know what the position is, can you write to me, Hugh? And let me know when anything is. That'd be great.
Sure, I can. Should have received a copy of the minutes from and notes and so forth from that meeting, the last meeting. So yes, Ruth, we're very happy to, so whilst you may not have formal membership, I think everyone welcomes your input and your expertise in terms of rough sleep.
I just thought I'd ask, that was all.
No, as I say, there is a process that I have to go through.
Yeah, you do it.
Just to clarify, Chairman, Councillor Jacobs, I understand, is on our distribution list, so should be receiving. If you're not
everything, no, I don't. No.
Then please let us know, and we'll have a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I think we are moving towards being able to have a cup of coffee. Are there any other issues that any members would like to raise with respect to future work for the panel?
Yes, please, Mark. Sorry
Go
to interrupt you.
Actually, go on.
So section 2, retaining and enhancing the volunteer base generated by COVID-19. Should we try and actually arrange a meeting so we can try and have some make some progress of that before the end of this lockdown?
Yes. Simple
Brilliant,
answer,
that would be really good.
So, as I say, Hayley and I have been talking quite a lot just lately. The problem is, to some extent, is the panorama changes a lot, it's progressing a lot of the time. And I know that we did have a conversation not so long ago where we said, what could we cover that would make a difference? And Hayley made this great point. She said, sometimes you just want to ask the question, what is the best thing we can do for you? And deliver on it tenfold. And that's where I feel that there's an opportunity to explore that more. But I'll certainly come back, and it's probably more informative if there's more than me at the conversation.
Brilliant. And the only other thing was we did have the executive member agree for a carers champion. Could we make a formal recommendation to the council, because we do have that ability?
Yes, we can. Yes, we definitely shall. I think it's something that Ros and I touched upon a long time ago, because I wanted her experience of it, to understand her experience.
The right person, definitely.
Sorry?
I think she's the right person.
Only for the information.
Let's discuss the role before the candidate.
So, as I say,
only for the information.
Again, there are systems, there are processes in place that one must adhere to. I've learned all too well.
Exactly.
Just to pick up that point, Chairman, would some, if you want to make a formal representation, would somebody like to move such a?
Oh, yes.
I'm happy to move if that's.
I'll second that, Chairman.
Seconded and thirded by Councillor Cato. Thank you very much. Yes, we'll proceed with a formal approach on that. Any other points need to be raised? Ladies and gentlemen.
Chair, it's Hayley.
Right, Hayley. Sorry.
Sorry, I did have my hand up. We had a discussion, Chairman, about whether we would find an inquiry session for the carers work useful.
I think that I was looking once again to go to the House of Commons Health and Social Care Committee report by the King's Fund. What I felt about that was that it provided a really helpful blueprint to some extent in terms of how you draw in that inquiry evidence and in what form it should be. So that for me kind of said, yeah, that's a really good way forward. I think that if we are going to, and when we have our discussion, our next discussion in the near future, I think that that was something that I would really be very keen that's on the agenda, that the approach would be via an inquiry day. And I think in particular, we can call upon Georgie's help to talk about the partners that we have in that and how we can form the inquiry panels and so on and so forth. But yes, as you know, you suggested it. I thought it was great, so I'm hugely committed to it.
Hayley, if you're looking to us to lobby government on the proposals and recommendations you sent, should we also be submitting to full council a letter doing that, or is this something we should arrange outside the meeting? Could we agree in principle to send a letter to?
Let's agree in principle that that's what we are going to do, and then we can agree off camera what it is, how we're going to, the content and the form and so forth. Any other points? Well, thank you very much for your time, effort and enthusiasm, and this meeting is closed.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.